Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this is arguably one of the most talked about cars of 2022, the MG4. And I promise you I was going to have it all nice and clean for this video, but all of the car washes in the area have got frozen pipes, so yeah, you can still tell it's volcanic orange, but just a little bit dirty. When MG released the first generation ZS EV, it was an instant hit here in the UK because it meant that you could get yourself into a practical family-sized SUV that was electric and for under £30,000. There's actually nothing out there that could compete for that money. And that was also the same with the second EV that MG brought out, the 5, because it was the world's first electric estate car, and again, it was around £30,000. Now, this is the difficult third album from MG, the 4. Now, firstly, it is actually a ground-up EV. It's not based on an ICE platform. And secondly, we have a car here that's under £30,000 and you can get around 281 claimed miles on it. That's a heck of a statement from MG. So as a result, it has been called a bit of a game changer. So I've had this MG4 for a week and I'm going to answer a couple of questions. Number one, is it any good? And number two, is it really a game changer? Stick with me to find out. Now then, the MG4's styling. So the first thing you'll notice when you look at this MG4 is the volcanic orange paintwork. Now granted, it's not going to be to everyone's taste. Don't worry, other colours are available, but it is very striking and distinctive, and it does have a quite, hey, look at me stance about it. Now granted, on days like today, it's actually been more of a safety issue because the visibility has been very poor. But when you look past the paintwork, you come across a very distinctive and good looking car. Definitely a departure from anything else MG have brought out, but it also looks like an EV as well because we've got this short stubby nose that has a kind of a shark's nose effect to it, and also we've got that really distinctive rear end with that unique light bar, and also at night it has got a bit of a party trick to it which is very distinctive. Also, I do love the twin spoilers at the rear of this trophy. Now granted, they have no aerodynamic purposes, but they do look very fancy. Also, I do like the 17-inch alloy wheels. Now granted, they're not technically alloys, they're actually covers on top of alloy wheels. And this is something I think we're going to see from manufacturers in the future, where you can actually get to choose your kind of alloy cover design in the future to make your own car very personalized and distinctive. We've already seen this with brands like Toyota with the BZ4X, and even with cars like the Lucid Sapphire. So this is definitely something we're going to see in the future. But let me know what you think of the MG4 styling in the comments section below. But it is definitely a step forward in the right direction for MG. Now on that note, I think it's a time that we stop looking at the exterior of the car and we see what MG have done with the interior. Sat in the front of the MG4, just like the exterior, you are greeted with a very modern and very striking interior. Again, it is a step in the right direction for MG. Now, something I will mention straight away is that there's no start-stop button for the car. As soon as you get in and sit in the driver's seat, the car starts up for you, which I actually think is really cool, and just like a Tesla or a Polestar. Now, when it comes to getting in and out of the MG4, it is just like a regular family hatchback, so it is easy to get into, and the doors open pretty nice and wide. However, if you have got any kind of mobility issues, by all means give the 4 a try, but I'd probably recommend looking at something like the ZS EV, just because you get a higher or raised seating position. And then once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that the seats themselves are very comfortable. There's a nice combination of fabric and faux leather, and there is plenty of adjustment here in the driver's seat because it is electrically adjustable on the trophy. Now there isn't any lumbar support, which is a little bit disappointing, but I have found the seats to be pretty supportive. And also with the steering wheel, well, I got both rake and reach adjustment, so getting the ideal driving position is easy. Now, interior quality is actually pretty good. Now, don't forget, this is a car that starts at under £30,000, so please don't expect German levels of quality. There is quite a lot of hard plastic in here, but we have got soft touch plastics here on the dash, and we have got some faux leather here on the doors. Now, the top of the doors are hard plastic, but we have also got some faux leather here on the armrest and some nice decent sounding and decent quality piano black plastic here on the center console. Now granted, I'm not the biggest fan of it because it does leave fingerprints and smudges, but there's actually no real areas here you need to rest your hand, so it should remain smudge free. But yeah, around the rest of the cabin you will find some slightly lower quality plastics, but again, this is a car that starts under £30,000. But it's absolutely fine, and actually driving around in the MG4 I've not really experienced any creaks or rattles, so that is again a big bonus. Cubby spaces in the MG4 are actually pretty good. Unlike other manufacturers making these bespoke EVs on their own platforms, some of the storage solutions are actually quite quirky. So the door pockets are of a decent size. You can get a medium-sized bottle of drink in there, but they're not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. Now here on the center console area, we have got up front and high up a wireless charging pad, which is actually a really cool place to put it. However, even though it is rubber lined, it's not the best quality of rubber. So if you do drive in an enthusiastic fashion, you will find that the phone slides around a bit, and as a result the wireless charging becomes very temperamental. Sometimes it will charge your phone, other times it won't. Now there are a couple of little holes on the side here. Now you might be thinking that's a quality issue, but it's not. It's actually so you can get a cable through if you want to attach your phone and connect it to things like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, because we have got a USB-A, USB-C and 12-volt socket underneath this little shelf. However, from where I'm sat, I actually cannot see it. Now going back to the storage, underneath here we have got two cup holders, and they are of a decent depth and rubber lined as well, and they have got plastic grippers on them, so they will hold your bottle or your cup of coffee in place. Then just behind there we've got this little lid, and if we pull it back, reveals again a bit more storage, and it is rubber lined, but it is the same rubber we got here on the wireless charging pad. But I do like the fact that it has a cover, so that way items can't be seen if you want to leave them in the car. And then there is a little netted area here, which is probably useful for perhaps a parking permit, but you wouldn't want to put anything kind of sharp or maybe metal in there because it will rub against the plastic. And then we have got your center armrest, and if you lift it up, we have again got a decent amount of storage space there, and there is a little bit of rubber at the bottom as well. And then finally we have got the glove box, which is of an okay size. Granted, there's no kind of owner's manual in there, but it's again not lined with any fabric, and yeah, loose items will rattle around a bit. Now, when it comes to physical buttons here in the MG4's interior, they're very few and far between. MG have taken the bold step of having a lot of the functions controlled by either the infotainment system or the steering wheel controls. So when it comes to physical buttons, we've got 6 of them up here just underneath the infotainment system. One of them is actually a shortcut button for the infotainment system, or a home button. We have got an on-off switch for your air conditioning. We have got your demister for the front and rear windows, your hazard lights and volume controls. Then in terms of another physical button, we have got your electric handbrake here on the dash, and we've also got your rotary knob here for your gear select. Now we're moving on to the steering wheel controls. So on the left hand side, these do things like your voice control, we've got your radar guided cruise control, and we've also got a dedicated button that you can select for what you want. So for what I've done is I've actually made it the drive mode select. And then on the right hand side, we've got your communication controls, we've got your driver data controls, and again we've got a specialist button here which has actually been connected to the air conditioning system. So it is a shortcut button there, which means you can change the fan strength and the temperature without having to go onto the infotainment system. So that makes it really useful and easy to use when driving. And then the only kind of physical buttons here we got are your window buttons, and we have got a little rotary knob here to adjust the wing mirrors. So in terms of physical buttons here in the MG4, they're very few and far between, and that's a bold move from MG. Now when it comes to the infotainment system, we've got a 10.25 inch touchscreen display. In terms of the clarity, it looks really nice, but when it comes to things such as responsiveness, it's a little bit slow, and some of the icons do get quite small and fiddly. So it makes it difficult to use when on the move. So what I recommend is, if you're going to go for a journey in your MG4, set this up first before you set off. Now granted, as I said, you've got a shortcut button here on the right hand side which can do your air conditioning or your source control depending on which you choose, But I would be honest, yeah, get it sorted here before you set off, because it is not the quickest system out there, and it is a little bit fiddly in terms of the icon sizes. Then in front of the steering wheel, we have got a 7-inch digital dashboard display, and just like the infotainment system, the clarity is very clear and very vibrant and easy to read when on the move. Surprisingly, you're not bombarded with information whilst you're driving, and you can change the driver data display using the right-hand button here on the, or D-pad I should say, on the steering wheel. Now, the only thing I have found is that on the left-hand side, we have got this little lane and car there, and that's for your radar-guided cruise control, and also lets you know if there's any vehicles present in your surrounding area. However, I have been parked up, and the little screen has kind of gone wild with cars appearing either side of me when there's actually nothing there. So again, just like the infotainment system, it is a nice step forward for MG, but it just needs a bit of fine-tuning and a bit of sharpening up. But it's, again, a step in the right direction for them. And then finally, we just here have the steering wheel, which is of now a nice new unique shape. And actually with this shape, you can see that digital dashboard display really clearly. I really do like that. And this does feel nice in your hands, especially with the fact that it is actually heated, because it is -1 outside. So yeah, this is a step in the right direction for MG. But on that note, I think it's now time that we move out of the front of the MG4 and see what it's like in the back. Sat in the back of the MG4, it's not too bad back here. However, I was expecting a bit more space. Now, that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've not got the best of knee room, and if I sit up straight, actually, headroom's not too bad. But I do think if you are 6 foot tall, you might struggle back here, so perhaps a couple of adults for a short journey. But you could easily get 3 kids back here, and speaking of kids, we have got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats, and what I like is that we have got this leather cover, so it actually kind of covers the bars there, which make it pretty easy to affix a child seat. Now, cubby spaces are not too bad. We've got some okay sized door pockets, again not lined with any fabric, but you can get a small bottle of drink in there. We've got your aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats, and we've also got a couple of extra little pockets here if you want to put your smartphone in there, so that is actually quite handy. Now, we have got one USB-A charging input there, so unfortunately, if there's 2 kids back here with mobile devices, they're going to have to share the charging. And just underneath, there is a little tray area where perhaps you could put your phone in there. But again, it's not lined with any fabric or rubber. And unfortunately, we don't have any armrests here with any additional cup holders. So that's a little bit disappointing. But on the plus side, we have got these large windows here, and they are, even though they are tinted, there is a little bit of light coming into the back here. But again, because of that dark headlining, it can feel a bit dark and claustrophobic back here. But also the windows, they do open all the way, which is really handy. But other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it here in the back of the MG4. I mean, for adults, it should be fine for a short journey. But I'm not sure I could enjoy a long journey in the MG4, perhaps going up and down the country maybe. But at least it is comfortable. And on that note, I think it's now time that we go see what it's like in the MG's boot. Opening the boot on the MG4 presents you with 363 litres of space, which is not too bad for this class of car. However, it can't beat the likes of a Skoda Enyaq. But once you've got the boot open, you are greeted with a nice wide square load area, so you could easily get a couple of suitcases or a few weekend bags in there. Also, there's no load lip to navigate over either, so if you do put the rear seats down and you have an almost completely flat load area, you can load actually some large bulky items into the back of the 4. Now, we have got some underfloor storage, which is actually quite handy, and it's good if you want to put some items in there that you don't want people to see. But you're probably noticing the cable bag is actually on top of the boot floor, because although there is a bit of underfloor storage, there's not enough to put the cable bag in there, which is a bit disappointing. Also, what's a bit disappointing is when it comes to features in the boot of the MG4, because there aren't any. We have no tethering hooks, we've got no 12-volt socket. In fact, the only thing we've got is a couple of little cubby areas on the edges with a bit of netting. So that is a bit disappointing, but again, I will forgive the MG4 because of its price tag. But yeah, it'll be fine for your weekly shop and carrying some large bulky items on occasion. And you know what? I think on that note, it's time that we close this boot on the MG4 and we find out what it's like to drive. Now, before I start the driving part of the review, I do want to apologise if I'm driving quite tentatively and I'm not looking at the camera that much. The reason being is that's my visibility. It is actually very foggy out, so I am paying particular attention to the road. So, when you get driving in the MG4, first impressions are very positive, especially if you've driven either the ZS or the MG5. This feels like a completely different animal. In fact, it feels fun to drive and very comfortable at the same time. Now, when it comes to visibility, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Now, forward visibility is really brilliant. I got a great view of the road ahead. The A-pillars are quite thick, but the way that they're raked, it actually means that when I'm at a junction, I don't find myself looking around the A-pillar and having a bit of a blind spot at the front of the car. So I do like that. Also, the wing mirrors are of a decent size, and I have got blind spot monitoring on this trophy spec. And if I look over my shoulder, I do find that there is quite a thick C-pillar there. And yes, I'm happy with the fact that I've got blind spot monitoring, but again, it's only on the trophy. And then rear visibility, it's not the best. It is a little bit of a letterbox view out of the back of the 4. And also as well, the 2 outer rear seats do have quite big headrests, so they do obstruct your view a little bit. Now, there is one other thing I am going to mention about rear visibility on the MG4, and that's in regards to the kind of, you know, the dirt and stuff you'll get on your day-to-day driving, especially like on a day like today. Now, because we've got that kind of boot integrated spoiler lower down on the rear window, it does actually mean that all the muck and wet and grime and stuff that you pick up off the road doesn't actually flick up onto the rear screen, so I really do like that. However, because we've got on this trophy that double spoiler design, it does mean that the dirt and everything actually kind of accumulates and goes down the center of the screen. So your rear visibility, although is, you know, like I said, a bit of a narrow letterbox view, you also get a lot of grime in that building up on the center of the screen, and it makes its way down depending on how wet it is. So that's just something to be aware of. But other than that, first impressions of the MG4 are hugely positive, and this does feel like a big step in the right direction for MG. Now, there are 3 trim levels to choose from in the MG4 range. There is the entry-level SE, the SE long range, and then this, the Trophy long range. Now, personally, I recommend going for the SE long range because you can get what MG claim up to 281 miles of range. Now, granted, yes, if you go for the Trophy, just drop a little bit down to 270, but really that's only 11 miles. But also it does mean as well that you save yourself a little bit of money, and actually the MG4 then feels really good value because it's around £28,000. If you go for the top of the range Trophy, you are looking over 30, and therefore it doesn't seem like such a bargain, and it does creep closer to rivals like the Volkswagen ID3. So that would be my pick to choose from. However, if you want to take advantage of all of the safety features available, then go for the Trophy. Because the one thing that's a little bit disappointing on the SE and the SE long range is that you don't get blind spot monitoring and things like rear cross traffic alert. So you do get kind of all the safety features on the Trophy, and you will have to, you know, live without the blind spot detection if you go for the SE or SE long range. But you do get things like the adaptive cruise control as standard. So that is one big positive. But yeah, that would be my personal choice. Go for the SE long range, save yourself a bit of money compared to the Trophy, and you'll feel like you've bagged yourself a bit of a bargain. Now, there are 2 batteries on offer on the MG4 range, and it depends on what trim level you go for to determine which battery you get. So the entry-level SE gets a 51 kilowatt-hour battery, and the SE long range and Trophy get a larger 64 kilowatt-hour battery. Now, when it comes to ranges, the SE gets a range claimed of 218 miles, the SE long range 281, and the Trophy 270 because it's a little bit heavier. That's again why I recommend going for the SE long range, because 281 miles for under 30 grand, yeah, is an awful amount of car for the money. Now, when it comes to charging, the MG4 has got the ability to do 150 kilowatt charging. So that means on the SE, you can go from 10 to 80% in around 39 minutes, and 10 to 80% on the long range and trophy in around 35 minutes, which is actually pretty decent again. And even MG say, you know what, when you're charging at 150 kilowatt, you can pop in and have yourself a coffee and then get back and your car's up to 80%. So again, that is actually really impressive. And as you can see on the screen, those are the other charging times if you're going to use something like a 7 or 50 kilowatt charger. Now, my experience with the MG4. So I'm going to be honest, the temperature on the outside has not gone above 2 degrees Celsius this week since I've had the MG4. So I've not been expecting 270 miles of range. Now, on a full charge, it has given me a smidge over 200, around 204 miles. And that's actually pretty good considering I didn't condition the battery, the exterior temperature, and actually I kind of drove it about 5 miles straight away, first thing in the morning, to get it charged. So the battery wasn't warm, or as I said, it wasn't conditioned for it. So I am actually really impressed by that, and I've not had any range anxiety whilst driving the MG4. So yeah, in regards to its range and charging capabilities, again, for the price, so just like other MG EVs, we have got a regeneration system in the braking, and you have got 3 modes for it, 1 being the weakest, 3 being the strongest. Now, unlike other MG EVs, it is operated via the touchscreens that can be very fiddly, especially when on the move. So as I mentioned, just make sure everything's set the way you want it before you set off on your journey. Now, I've got it in its strongest setting, which is number 3, and it is actually pretty good. However, it's not what I would call proper one-pedal driving that you would see in something like a high-end Icona or Ioniq 5. That's definitely got a stronger regen system. So that's something I'd like to see from MG, perhaps put in a 4th or 5th regen level. So it actually means that when you take your foot off the accelerator pedal, the car really does slow down for you. But other than that, I've not had any real issues with it whatsoever. It drives really nicely. The brakes themselves have got a really nice feel to them. And the regen system, especially when you're driving around town, you'll have no issues with it. But it's just not as strong as other cars out there. So what's the ride and refinement like in the MG4? Well, ride, I'm really impressed with. It feels very supple, it feels very comfortable, deals with the bumps and imperfections really well, but there is a bit of firmness to it, which is actually really good when it comes to kind of the handling and going around the corners. Now I'm about to do my little humpback bridge and level crossing test. And it dealt with them really well. In fact, I don't know if you could tell from the way I was kind of bobbing up and down, there was no body float whatsoever. It settled down really quickly, but it wasn't too firm. It deals with the bumps and imperfections really well. And in terms of being a long-range cruiser, it's actually really good. I could easily do a long journey in the MG4 and come out the other end feeling nice and relaxed. And refinement levels are actually really good at the same time. When you're driving at low speed, it is very quiet. I mean, whisper quiet. And when you get up to speed, and I'm going to get up to about 60 miles an hour now, the only things I can hear are wind noise coming off the wing mirrors and the A-pillar. Tyre noise is surprisingly subdued and very well isolated away from the cabin. I really do like that. This is again a very nice, comfortable cruiser. And even on very poor road surfaces, you don't get much in the way of tyre noise again coming into the cabin. What's nice as well is actually the stereo on the MG4 is pretty good as well. So again, if you're on a long journey, yeah, it just all works very well together as a long range cruiser. Now, the handling. this is definitely a strength for the MG4. So we've got those batteries available in the range. We also have one motor and it's rear wheel drive. So when you start driving this, especially if you've driven the ZS or the 5, this feels just so good. It actually does put a smile on your face, and this weird shape to the steering wheel, it just works. It feels really nice in my hands. The way it's shaped, I can see the digital dashboard display, and it just feels very comfortable. It just feels right to drive. I am, again, hugely impressed by the handling on it. And of course, because I said that the suspension had a slight firmness to it, when you go around the corners, there's hardly any body roll or lean. And I will be honest as well, on these greasy conditions, you can get the tail out a little bit. I mean, you have to push it hard, but it will want to let go, and you can actually get a bit of lift-off oversteer in the 4. I was really impressed by that. And yeah, and it felt predictable as well. Now, that's not to say that it's a really sporty EV. I'm just letting you know that because of these kind of conditions, I was able to do that in the 4. And because of having this larger battery, I've got around 200 brake horsepower. It does mean you've got a nice bit of performance there for you. Yeah, I really do like it. In terms of just a great driver's EV, it just ticks all the boxes. Now, when it comes to the performance side of the MG4, because it's rear-wheel drive, you're kind of expecting some, you know, pretty potent figures. Now, with the smaller battery, it is an equivalent of around 168 brake horsepower, and with this version of the larger battery, it's about 200 brake horsepower. Now, although there is a sizable difference in power outputs there, performance is actually very similar. Now, with the smaller battery, 0 to 60 actually takes around 7.5 seconds, and with the larger battery, it's a bit slower. It's actually 7.7 seconds. So that actually kind of shows it's got a bit of pokiness about it, but because of course it's an electric vehicle, it feels much quicker. It feels like it's just constantly going, and because you're not changing gear, that torque and, you know, acceleration is just instantaneous. But the thing about the MG is not the 0 to 60 figure, it's actually the 0 to 30 figure, which is around 3 to 3.5 seconds. And that's actually really impressive. And off the lights, yeah, this has got a bit of go about it, and you will put other cars out there to shame. So in regards to the kind of performance of the MG4, you've got a really good amount. I mean, yes, there is a performance version coming next year, but really for everyday use and everyday drivers, what we have on offer right here is more than enough. So what's the handling like in the MG4? Well, this is a big highlight and definitely one of the standout things about the car. Now, if you've got a ZS or a 5, this will feel like a completely different animal. I mean, firstly, the shape of the steering wheel just feels really nice, and it does feel lovely in your hands. But then you just feel everything through the corners because the front wheels are just doing the steering, because this is rear wheel drive. There's just a single motor at the back of the car. So as a result, this is a fun car to drive. And even if you put it in sport mode, it feels very nippy. And not only that, there's hardly any roll in the corners or any lean. It feels very composed. And because it's actually rear wheel drive, I've actually had the tail out a couple of times in damp conditions. It will give a little bit of a slide. So this does put a smile on your face. This is actually a very rewarding car to drive. But there is actually a performance version coming next year where a 0 to 60 time is under 3 seconds. And there's also a long range version coming as well. However, I think most people will be more excited for the long range version than the super powerful one, because yeah, the price is going to go up and it will be very much in line with rivals. So MG, stick to your guns. Just keep these cars kind of low priced. But yeah, definitely bring the long range version. Okay, bring the powerful one as well, because I'm sure that would be a hoot and a half. But yeah, when it comes to the MG4's handling, it's a surprise, but it's a very positive one. So what have been some of the highlights and low points I've experienced living with the MG this week? Well, highlights have been the looks on the exterior and the interior. I mean, this really does turn heads and is a brilliant next step car for MG. I mean, I cannot wait to see what they bring out in the future, because all their cars now are going to have this kind of MG family styling to them. So I really do like that. I do love on this trophy the amount of standard equipment you get, especially when compared to rivals. It really is jam-packed. Now, although we've got so much tech and kit on here when it comes to convenience and safety, there are things missing. I mean, front parking sensors, for example, that is something I would have liked to have seen on the 4, so that's a little bit disappointing. And also the fact that you don't get your blind spot monitoring on all trim levels, because this is something I think, especially on electric cars nowadays, that just should be there as a given. Now, as I've mentioned, the infotainment system is not the quickest system out there, and there are better systems available. And as I said before, just make sure you kind of set the car up how you want it before you get going, because it is a very fiddly system. Now, something I will mention actually, and I've needed to do it today, was actually locate where the fog light switch is, because I'm looking on where the light switch is here on the stalk, but there's nothing there to tell me how to adjust it. And then I actually found it in the top left-hand corner of the screen. It seems to be a bit of an afterthought. So that is, yeah, that was a little bit weird. Also, I think something that's going to kind of cause a little bit of controversy, I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker, it's just the location of the charging port as well, being on the rear 3/4 panel of the MG, because I think a lot of customers and that have been pretty much used to having it at the front of the car. So I think that's something that people will want to get used to as well, especially if they've had something like a ZS or the 5. Yeah, we've got no frunk. I mean, this is a ground up EV from MG. We should have a boot at the front. We should be making, or should I say taking, full advantage of the space available. But other than that, no, I have been really impressed with this new MG4, and I think it's now time we go to the conclusion. So what are my thoughts on the new MG4? Well, this is a massive step in the right direction for MG. I mean, in terms of looks, design, exterior and interior, it's a bold move from the brand, but it is a positive move as well. And I cannot wait to see what other designs they can come up with in the future. This would easily tempt me away from the likes of the Volkswagen ID3, which looks very just humdrum in comparison. In terms of the technology in the kit, it really is jam-packed, and like I said, it is still very good value for money, particularly with that mid-spec, with not just what you get in terms of equipment, but what you get in terms of range and charging abilities as well. It's still very spacious. You can seat 4 very comfortably, and it is very comfortable as well for a long journey. Now, I said at the beginning that a lot of people have been calling this a game changer car. Do I believe that? No. Well, I'm going to say yes and no, but here's why. This isn't a game changer car to me. To me, this is a benchmark set out to go against all other manufacturers. This is a massive wake-up call, because to have just shy of 300 miles range in a car that's under £30,000, other manufacturers need to be looking at this car and they need to be using it as a benchmark, and they've got to meet it. They have to say to themselves, we don't mind sacrificing a little bit of interior quality, maybe a little bit of boot space, something like that, to get buyers in. Brands like Ford need to be looking at cars like this and coming up with a rival for them. when they axed, or when they will axe, the Ford Fiesta in 2023, I was gobsmacked that they didn't have an electric replacement ready to fill that gap in the market, because this really, at under £30,000 for the SE long range, has no rivals. This is a benchmark car. Now, in regards to that and the price, that's where it's a game changer. But I prefer to call it more of a benchmark to everyone else. Everyone else has to look at this and they have to beat it. Because at the moment, this should beat so many other mainstream rivals, and it will very easily as well. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the new MG4 EV. As always, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. If you've got any questions about the MG4 or comments as well, please put them down in the box below, and don't forget to subscribe on social media at the same time. But in the meantime, guys, yeah, I've really enjoyed this MG4. It's definitely one of the cars of 2022. But you guys all have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all in the next video. So take care, everyone, and bye-bye.